So tonight is gonna be a little bit different than normal. I often get asked to recommend wines, and it's a very difficult thing to do, but I do enjoy doing it as long as people appreciate the wines and I have a general idea of what type of wines they're looking for or what type of wine styles they are into. It's difficult because I don't know the availability around where somebody may live. So I chose one store that I know is semi-near one of my friends that asked for some recommendations, and I put it in a document here, and I'm going to go through it as quickly as possible because there's a fair amount of wines on it, but I think this would give the best analysis of the wines that I can, minus the few words I put on each one of these, and the document has got a tiny picture too, because you walk into a liquor store, wine store, and it's a wall of wine and you can't find anything. You're looking for a name, but now I put the labels here. I think it'll make it easier. This should be a work in progress over time. I used to have one like this for wines in that $15 to $20 range, and there's still some in that range. This goes up to about 40. I even put a few that are a little bit more than that, just because of how they taste compared to their price. So while I'm doing that, I opened up Louis Martini Monte Rosso Vineyards Cab 2014. So this isn't your normal Louis Martini. Louis Martini is one of the owners of the Monte Rosso Vineyard. So one of the vineyards I love most in California is this Monte Rosso Vineyard. It's sort of a legendary vineyard for people that are sort of aware of it. Red volcanic soils. I love the wine. It's deep and concentrated, but nuanced, and has a good minerality to it. I know this is a generic term, but I absolutely love this wine. It has more of a deep, ripe, cherry type of flavor, rather than some cabs are more on the blackberry cassis. This is kind of a darker, riper, red fruited cab, if I can make a distinction. But that's what I'll be enjoying while I do this. So first, there is a store in Pennsylvania, Store Fine Wine, that may or may not have this wine, and I had it. It is the Flora Springs Trilogy Napa Valley. They claim it's $75. I think it's normally 60 to 70. It was on sale for 37. If you can find this wine, absolutely buy it. I had it recently. It's amazing. Flora Springs Trilogy. It doesn't matter on the vintage. It might have been a vintage that they had extra. That's why they put it on some clearance. But the rest come from Joe Canals Lawrenceville, because that's a store that I'm well aware of and I could easily search their site. So I'm starting with the Kaken Ultra Malbec. It's in the 20s. So there's a lot of Argentinian Malbec out there. I believe this one in that price range is still really good. Dark and brooding and juicy, but still valued well. Where I think a lot of Malbecs either have like a thinner taste or sort of an over-oaked taste. I believe this is a really good one. Some of the great Malbecs now are very, very expensive. $50 and above, and really the great ones are almost $100 now, and it's a lot to spend on an Argentinian Malbec. But if that's what you're into, go for it. Or an Argentinian Cabernet. Portuguese Reds, some of the best values I still believe out there, but because the grapes are not normal, it's Touriga Nacional, Touriga Franca, Tinto Roriz, which is just Tempranillo, and some others. And I typically go for the Portuguese Reds from the Douro. So this one is Quinta de Valle Mayo Meandro Red Douro. It's in the 20s. I believe it's a pretty good red wine. For that price point, I believe that Portuguese red wines are a great value. I don't know them all offhand, but I've had some Portuguese reds in that $20, $30, 20 to 30s that are great. I think anything under that's kind of getting a little bit... I guess if you spend less and go cheap, you might get cheap. So, next one, Prats and Symington, so PNS, Postscriptum de Crescia, another Douro, another Portuguese red. So why I like this one is this is their second wine, at least I think it's their second wine, but their first wine is one of my favorite, if not my favorite Portuguese red I've ever had, and I have it over here to my left. And when I drink a bottle of wine and I enjoy it enough, I put it up on a wall, sort of as a memorandum and a decoration. So this is actually the Crescia. This used to be about a $50 bottle. Now it's got into the 90s, but the one I'm talking about is the second wine, and this one's in the 20s. So great wine from a great producer, PNS de Crescia Douro. Next one is Obsidian Ridge, a discovery I've made in the last 18 months. Obsidian Ridge Cab, it's in the 30s, and it's from Lake County. and it's awesome. I let it decant an hour or two. It only gets better with a decant. This wine is amazing for in the 30s. Absolutely one of the great finds. I like it so much that I'm on their wine list, and obviously I kept one of those bottles. Leviathan is another Cabernet. It's in the 30s, and the story goes that the person that makes Screaming Eagle, probably the most expensive cab in Napa, also makes this. I don't know if he still works at Screaming Eagle or not, or if this is just some side gig he has or a consulting gig. Either way, I don't love wines like this with a label and a name like this, but the wine is good, and it's in the 30s. If you could find it for in the 30s, it's often on sale, and it's a good wine. I can't say anything else about it. In that same vein, there's a wine called Juggernaut, and this is probably the only wine I recommend that's in the 20s. That's a cab out of California. I don't absolutely love it, but I thought I would hate it, and I wanted to hate it. It's got a big, heavy bottle, this lion roaring on it. It screams marketing and not enough work inside the bottle, but it's a good wine for the 20s. It was 17-ish when I first started getting it. Now it seems to creep up. If it gets beyond $20, I'd say I might need to find another one in that range to recommend. But if that's your second wine of the night or having a party, that wine's pretty good. I can't bash it, so even though I wanted to. Next one on my list, Zenato Valpolicella Ripasso. So an Italian wine made from Corvina, Rondinella, Molinara. That doesn't really matter as much, except that if you like Amarone, which is a bigger, bolder Italian type of wine, this is sort of like a bargain Amarone. It's in the 20s. This might be crept up to about 30s, but a pretty good alternative to a bigger style wine out of Italy. The next one, Bodega Emilia Moro. It's a Ribera del Duero. So there's 3 primary regions in Spain that specialize in Tempranillo. Ribera is one of them. Rioja is the other. Toro is the other one. Ribera, I believe, makes, well, they all make great wine out of Tempranillo. This specific producer, Emilia Moro, the wine's in the 20s. I don't have prices on these 2 wines, so I need to add prices to these 2 wines, but it's in the 20s. Great bargain in the 20s from Spain. Spain used to be one of the places I recommended the most. I still recommend Spain as a great bargain area, but sometimes the wine prices have crept up. The next one, this one's over 40. So this is El Nido, Bodega and El Nido. It's called Clio. It's mostly Monastrell, the Mourvedre grape with a little bit of Cab. I think it's 80-20 Monastrell to Cabernet. And it's about $45. It's also crept up over the years, but it's a pretty great wine. I used to always have this slogan, everybody loves Clio. Next 2 wines are from the same winery, Chateau Pesquis. And I don't think they're at Joe Canals, but there's 2 wines they have, and they're Southern Rhone wines from the Côte de Ventoux. So it's not one of the more prolific Southern Rhone regions like Châteauneuf-du-Pape, Gingondas, Vaccaras, but it's in a lesser region. But these 2 wines, Chateau Pesquis Artemia and Chateau Pesquis Quintessence, I think are awesome, and they're both in their 30s. So if ever run across those, great wines. Another Spanish wine next, and I'm surprised I don't have this on my wall, but Bodega Muga. So Muga's got a number of different wines. Their Reserva, that's about $28, is great, and I should be recommending it, but for a few dollars more in the 40s, low 40s, their Rioja Reserva Selección Especial is amazing. One of my favorite Spanish wines for the price. One of my favorite wines for the price. I think it absolutely tastes like a much more expensive wine. And then if you go above, they have an even one called Prado Anea, which is amazing, and that's about $75. But in this 40s, this is hard to beat as far as a wine. And that's Rioja, so again, Tempranillo out of Spain. Next one is back to the United States. Orange Swift is a wine producer, winery. This is called Abstract. It's a red blend. The label's very busy, looks like some crazy artwork. I haven't had it in a while, but I remember it being extremely bold and extremely flavorful. I'm pretty sure the alcohol was pretty high on it, so expect a higher octane wine, but very extracted. I think it's like a Zinfandel Petit Syrah blend. I'm not sure exactly, but I remember liking it. I put it here, kind of taking a risk that I haven't had it in a while, so maybe I need to try it again to make sure I should keep it on this list, but it's on this list anyway because I do like Orange Swift. The next one's Ridge. Ridge is an unbelievably good winery. And this is their Petit Syrah Light and Estate Dry Creek. I had this recently and I absolutely loved it. It's in the 40s. Petit Syrah is an amazing grape when you like Cabernet. It's an amazing alternative because it is not as high priced, but it's just as bold. Tastes a little different, not in a bad way, in a good way. To me, it's like a blackberry pie versus blackberry and cassis, which is Cabernet, or Cabernet has some other things going on too. Sometimes green pepper, sometimes dill. Petite Sirah's a little bit more one-dimensional on the bold and dark fruited flavors. It sometimes pours like engine oil, but small grape, thick skin, very extracted, always delicious and can age for a long time. Another Petite Sirah on the list, Robert Bially's Royal Punisher, high 30s, low 40s. It's crept up over the time, but again, big, bold, and delicious. It's an amazing wine. Petite Sirahs have a delicious factor. Sometimes wine just doesn't need to be anything extravagant, but just taste extremely good and be delicious, because it's kind of why we're drinking it, or at least partly why we're drinking it. Another Spanish wine next, and I do love this wine, and it's, I joke and I think it's like $20, and I'm probably gonna have to go buy a bunch because I think it's a really great wine for $20, especially cold winter night. Bodega Juan Hill, 18 messes, so it's a black and blue label, not the Juan Hill silver label, which unfortunately has kind of gone down over the years. And this is big and bold and delicious, and it's very high alcohol. I'm pretty sure it's 15.5, if not a little higher. So beware of that, but very big, very bold, great wine. The next one, Australia. Australia used to be sort of a region that had a lot of big and bold. They've pulled that back and have a little bit more restraint, and with that comes some higher prices, unfortunately. But in the $25 bracket here, Torbreck's Woodcutters Shiraz is awesome for $25. If I don't have one, I always keep one or two on hand as a weekday wine, second wine of the night, whatever it may be. I love that wine. Screw cap as well, but who cares? They do it a lot in New Zealand and Australia. Doesn't matter. Great wine for $25. Jumping up to the 50s or 50. I don't always often recommend Caymus much anymore because their prices have gone so high, but this one specifically, Caymus Suissun Grand Durif. Grand Durif's a synonym for Petite Sirah. It's $50. The wine's enormous and awesome and delicious. I recently introduced it to a friend of mine, and he ended up buying a case of it. He loved it so much. So Durif's the name of the Petite Sirah grape, so it's awesome. They call this Grand Durif. So those are some of the recommendations that I think are most aligned with big and bold in that 20 to 40, and a few were a little higher. Cabernet from France as an alternative. So it's different. Cabernet Sauvignon, birthplace is France, Bordeaux. And just like in Napa, the cheap ones, you get what you pay for. The cheap ones are the cheap ones, just like in Bordeaux. Sub $20 Napa Cab, sub $20 Bordeaux, you kind of get what you pay for. You start going a little further up, and you get some better wines. So I'm putting two on here, and both are at Joe Canal. So Chateau Calon Segura Marquis de Calon, $37. It's a cab-heavy blend from France, and it's a second label from a good chateau. So sometimes the second label wines, sort of like the Portuguese Corsia one, are really, really good. And in years where they can't use some of the leftover of their first bottling, may end up in the second bottling, so you just don't know sometimes. But cab heavy, something to try. The other one I put, Chateau Costa Stranel, Le Médoc de Causse, again, another second wine, their number one wine, their base wine, their flagship wine's amazing. This is $33. So the first one's $37, this one's $33. Just two wines to try, to see if you like cabs from Bordeaux as something sort of different. I would try one of them, and if they're in, you enjoy them on your palate, you enjoy how they taste, the difference between that and an Napa Cab, sometimes it's great. Put them next to each other and try both. They will be vastly different, even though they're absolutely the same grape. Although the Bordeaux grapes are, well, Bordeaux is typically mostly blended. Not to say that the cabs in California aren't, but they don't put the whole blending. They say Cabernet, only 75% need to be Cabernet. They can put other grapes behind it. In Napa, though, it's going to be Cab Merlot, Cab Franc, Petit Verdot, Malbec. Could be other grapes, too. But left bank side of Bordeaux is predominantly Cab heavy, so that's why I'm recommending them here today in this video. But I love the right bank, but that's Merlot, Cab Franc heavy. You sometimes get some better bargains over there. But regardless, left bank, talking about Cabernet here, and big bold builder styled wines. For something different, and neither of these are big and bold. They are Italian. And one is Barbaresco, one is Barolo. Both are regions within Piedmont, and both are wines made from the Nebbiolo grape, one of my favorite grapes. One of the wines, so if you just take this away, I'm recommending is this Produttori di Barbaresco. The wine bottle looks sort of like this. This is one of their single vineyard ones. This one's a little bit more money, but in the $40 range. If you want to try something different, it's got high acid, high tannin, great food wine. I think it's amazing. One of my favorites, but sort of an acquired taste. It has this rose petal tar and other things going on, which sounds a little weird, but it is awesome to me, and some fresh strawberry flavors. So I put both on here, the Produttori di Barbaresco, and then I put another one, the Varga de Aldo Barolo, Albe. So two different ones. Very close. Both of those regions are extremely close. Barbaresco being the smaller of the Barolo. The Barolo might be a little bolder. Barbaresco maybe less, but they both are pretty high tannin wines and high tannin grapes. It looks like it pours like Pinot Noir. It'll taste nothing like Pinot Noir. This video has already gone longer than I expected. I'm going to talk about 3 more wines, or one wine category, maybe one more wine. Year in and year out, I always buy this specific Cabernet. It's Chapelet's Signature. This is the 2016. This is empty, but I always buy this every year. It's one of my favorite cabs that comes out every year in the $60 range. Although, because of the fires in Napa, I think some of the more recent vintages, the prices have gone up. But if you can find this one anywhere from 50 to 60, I think it's amazing. Decant it. You will not be disappointed for a little bit of a special cab. The other region that you get great bargain midweek wines, but you have to sort of like the grape, and it's the Sangiovese grape. These are Chiantis. Chiantis is still a bargain region. These are not the same producer, but this is the Chianti Classico. This is the Chianti Classico Reserva. So a little higher alcohol, a little bolder than this one. I just had this over the last 2 nights. This one I'll have another night. Sangiovese very much is a food wine, especially a red sauce wine, meatball type of wine, pasta type of wine. These pair perfectly. You don't want a wine to overpower your meal. You want it to complement it. These absolutely complement red sauce type meals, eggplant parms and lasagnas and pastas and meatballs and things of that nature. Other things too. I'd say pork as well. This would go really well with. I love Chiantis. You want to step it up beyond Chianti, you could go to Brunello. Now you're in the $50, $60 range. But Chiantis, these were $20-something each. So when I'm looking for those midweek wines, this is what I'm having sometimes. So that's it. 17 minutes. First time I've done something like this. Way longer than I wanted it to be. But those are my recommendations from Joe Canals, Lawrenceville, in the $20 to $40 range. We'll see what my friend thinks of the list. We'll see what he thinks of the video if he even watches it. And with that, have a good night.